Hello, everyone, and welcome to Curious Gorge. On this episode, we take a dive into Cabin 13 at Babcock State Park. Join hosts April Morgan and Scott Worley as we take a curious gorge into Babcock State Park, Cabin 13. Taylor Swift may have a popular affinity for the number 13, but for some West Virginians, the number has a sinister attachment. The 1996 murder at Cabin 13 in Babcock State Park. Nestled in between the majestic mountains and bubbling springs of West Virginia lies the scenic replica of Cooper's Mill, an iconic visualization of the Appalachian lifestyle located at Babcock State Park. Here, among the troves of hikers, mountain bikers, and whitewater rafters, soft whispers of a long-ago tragedy drift through the valley. Harkening back to the early spring morning of April 30th, 1996, when a 911 operator of Fayette County answered a call that would forever alter the peace found in this tiny community. On the other end of the line, a distressed Mike Flippo frantically cried for help. The well-known pastor of the landmark Church of God in Nitro, West Virginia, claimed that he and his wife, Cheryl, had been viciously attacked by a masked intruder in the middle of the night. He told the operator that he had been knocked unconscious and cut by the assailant. He stated his wife was breathing but was lying unconscious in a pool of her own blood. The quick response from the paramedics proved to be futile, as Cheryl Flippo was pronounced dead upon their arrival to the scene. Police arriving to Cabin 13 were quick to notice certain details of Mr. Flippo's story, and evidence at the scene were not adding up. They soon realized Mike Flippo was being anything but truthful. The evening of April 29, 1996, Mike Flippo and his wife Cheryl traveled to Babcock State Park for a quick, romantic getaway. As they arrived very late to the park, the check-in office was already closed, leaving the couple keyless to their cabin. The couple decided to proceed to Cabin 13 anyways, and found the lodging was already unlocked to their surprise. Shortly after arriving, Mr. Flippo left briefly to go use a payphone to check on a sick friend at the hospital. As a pastor and a good friend to many in his congregation, this was a common courtesy for the Flippos. After making his telephone call, Flippo returned to the cabin and started a cozy fire for he and his wife. The couple enjoyed a few rounds of card games and ate some ice cream before heading to bed. Around 2 a.m., Mr. Flippo was startled from sleep by a loud noise. Rising to investigate, Mr. Flippo encountered a figure lying on the ground between the bed and the wall. The intruder was in possession of a rope and wore a toboggan over his face. Before having the opportunity to waken and alert his wife, Mr. Flippo claimed the intruder hit him on the back of the head with a log from the firewood pile, knocking him unconscious. When Mr. Flippo awakened again, he found the intruder sitting on top of him, cutting at his legs with a knife. According to Mr. Flippo, the intruder then struck him on the forehead and knocked him unconscious once again. After some time, Mr. Flippo once again awoke, only to find this time the intruder was nowhere to be seen. After gaining consciousness, Mr. Flippo found his wife lying in a pool of her own blood on the ground. He placed his head on her chest and found her heart still beating. After this discovery, he fled the cabin in an attempt to seek help for his wife. Emergency Center records show that on April 30th, 1996, at approximately 2:11 a.m., Mr. Flippo made an emergency 911 phone call to report that an intruder had entered the cabin that he had rented and assaulted him and his wife. The 911 operator told Mr. Flippo to remain at the payphone and help would be on the way. Responding to the call was Deputy C. Bryant of the Fayette County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Bryant found Mr. Flippo at the payphone dressed in only his underwear. Blood was discovered on his legs. Mr. Flippo told Deputy Bryant that he had traveled to the park in a green Cadillac, but that it had been stolen. The deputy placed Flippo in his car and drove him to the cabin. Upon arrival to the Cabin 13, Deputy Bryant inquired about a red Camaro parked near the cabin. Mr. Flippo stated that he did not know who owned the Camaro and that he had not come to the park in a Camaro. Leaving Mr. Flippo in his police cruiser, Deputy Bryant entered the cabin. The deputy found no signs of forced entry and also noted that although it had been raining and the ground was soft, he found no footprints aside from his own around the cabin. Upon entering the cabin, the deputy found the dead body of Mrs. Flippo lying between a bed and a wall. The deputy observed that Mrs. Flippo's skull was opened and her brain matter was exposed. Leaving the gruesome discovery, Deputy Bryant returned outside where he encountered two paramedics arriving to the scene. One paramedic went inside the cabin while the other attended to Mr. Flippo. After confirming that indeed Mrs. Flippo was deceased, Mr. Flippo was taken to a local hospital. Deputy Bryant remained at the scene to conduct an investigation. After a medical evaluation at the hospital determined Mr. Flippo only to have small bruises on his forehead and on the back of his head, along with some scratches with minimal bleeding on his legs, a Fayette County Sheriff Detective, S. Kessler, arrived at the hospital. Once released from the hospital, Mr. Flippo agreed to accompany Detective Kessler to the police headquarters to give a statement. After taking Mr. Flippo's statement, Detective Kessler spoke over the phone with crime scene investigator Detective G. Burke. Detective Burke reported that there was no forced entry into the cabin. The crime scene looked staged, and that certain items were not where they logically should have been. It was after that phone call at approximately 10:33 a.m. that Mr. Flippo was informed he was indeed a suspect. Mr. Flippo was read his Miranda rights, and then he requested to speak with his attorney. All questioning at this point stopped, and the interrogation ended. At some point after this, however, Mr. Flippo requested medication and clothing to be retrieved from the cabin. Mr. Flippo's attorney arrived at police headquarters several hours later and took him away. On May 3, 1996, police arrested Mr. Flippo and charged him with murdering his wife. Subsequently, Flippo was indicted for first-degree murder by a grand jury. The unraveling of this tangled web would divulge dirty details of a struggling marriage. A man that had difficulty managing money to the point that his wife had to remove him from bank accounts and credit cards in an attempt to salvage their finances. A life insurance policy of $100,000 had been taken out by Mike Flippo for his wife Cheryl shortly before her demise. Another potential motive was hinted at when the state introduced evidence found in Flippo's briefcase at the crime scene. Pictures of Flippo's male friend in various states of undress. Flippo attempted to explain these photographs, stating that he and his friend had gone to Babcock for a baptismal retreat, and the photos were records of that baptism. Other suspicious financial occurrings have popped up over the years, furthering the accusations of financial irresponsibility of James Michael Flippo Sr. He is currently serving a life sentence with no chance of parole. But what dark memories lie imprinted within the walls of Cabin 13? Visitors staying at Cabin 13 at Babcock State Park since the tragedy report disembodied voices, darting shadow figures, and sudden, strong, sharp pains shooting through their heads. What secrets from that horrendous night remain? Can the spirits from the other side reveal any unknowns? Join us this spring as we travel to Cabin 13 at Babcock State Park to find some answers. Stay tuned and stay spooky. Join us as we launch our YouTube live series, Spring of 2024.